The evening air carried a hint of autumn as Jackson Mercer stepped out of his limousine. Camera flashes lit up the red carpet leading to the grand entrance of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Jackson straightened his custom-made suit jacket and put on the smile he had perfected over the years, polite, confident, but never reaching his eyes. "Mr. Mercer, over here." The reporters called out from behind the velvet ropes. Jackson gave them a small wave but didn't stop for questions. Tonight was the annual Children's Future Foundation Gala, an event he funded generously, but attended reluctantly. Social gatherings had become an ordeal since Elena's death 3 years ago. Inside, the museum's great hall had been transformed into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over New York's elite as they mingled, champagne glasses in hand, checkbooks ready to donate to a cause they'd mostly forget about by morning. Jackson nodded to familiar faces as he made his way through the crowd. "Jackson, there you are." Philip Green, his chief financial officer, appeared at his side with 2 glasses of whiskey. "I was beginning to think you'd skipped out." Jackson took the offered drink, still considering it. 3 hours. That's all I ask," Philip said, lowering his voice. "Make the speech, shake some hands, write a check. The board needs to see you engaged." Jackson sighed. "It's been 3 years, Phil. When will people stop watching me like I'm about to shatter?" Philip's expression softened. "Not everyone is watching for cracks. Some of us are just looking out for a friend." The evening dragged on predictably. Jackson made small talk with politicians, celebrities, and fellow business leaders. He discussed market trends, praised artistic achievements he knew nothing about, and avoided any conversation that might turn personal. When the time came for his speech, he delivered the carefully prepared words about innovation and responsibility that his PR team had written. The audience applauded enthusiastically, more for the size of his donation than the content of his message. By 11, Jackson had fulfilled his social obligations. He slipped away from the main hall, nodding to his security detail to prepare the car. As he waited in a quiet corridor, he loosened his bow tie and checked his phone. "Mr. Mercer?" Jackson looked up to see a young woman in catering staff uniform, standing a few feet away. She was black, probably in her mid-20s, with her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Unlike the other staff he'd encountered throughout the evening, she wasn't holding a tray or busying herself with cleanup. "The exit is that way if you're leaving," she said, pointing down the corridor. "Thank you," Jackson replied, returning to his phone. The woman didn't move. After a moment, Jackson looked up again, slightly annoyed. "Is there something else?" She glanced over her shoulder, then took a step closer. "Your wife is still alive." Jackson froze. The words hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath. For a moment, he simply stared at the young woman, his mind struggling to process what she'd said. "Excuse me?" His voice came out hoarse. "Your wife, Elena Mercer," the woman continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's alive." Jackson's shock quickly hardened into anger. For 3 years, he'd endured conspiracy theories and cruel hoaxes. Elena's body had never been recovered from the Mediterranean after the boating accident, which had fueled endless speculation. He'd learned to shut it all out. "Who put you up to this?" he demanded, taking a step toward her. The woman stood her ground. "No one, I've seen her." "Security," Jackson called out, his patience gone. 2 men in black suits appeared instantly from around the corner. The woman reached into her pocket, and the security guards tensed. But she only pulled out a folded piece of paper, which she thrust toward Jackson. "This is where they're keeping her. I work there part-time. I've seen her photos in the news. It's her." Before Jackson could respond, his security team had positioned themselves between him and the woman. "Sir, is there a problem?" the taller guard asked, his hand already on the woman's arm. Jackson should have had her removed immediately. He should have reported her to the event organizers or even the police. Instead, he found himself reaching for the paper. "Let her go." "Sir," I said, "let her go, Thomas." The guard reluctantly released his grip. Jackson took the paper and unfolded it. It contained an address in Connecticut and the words, "Patient 17, East Wing." "What's your name?" Jackson asked. "Zora Wilson." She rubbed her arm where the guard had gripped it. "I'm studying nursing. I work at the facility part-time. I shouldn't be there when you come." "Mr. Mercer, your car is ready," Thomas announced, clearly eager to end the interaction. Jackson stared at Zora, trying to read her expression. Was she delusional, running a scam, or was there something in her eyes that looked like genuine concern? "How do I know you're telling the truth?" he asked quietly. "The scar on her left wrist. She told me she got it falling from a tree when she was 9. Her father was so scared he fainted." Zora's eyes never left his. "She remembers that. She remembers you too, but it's complicated. They're doing something to her there." Jackson felt the blood drain from his face. Elena's childhood scar wasn't public knowledge. It wasn't something a random person could know. "Sir, we really should go," Thomas insisted. "Give me a moment," Jackson snapped. He turned back to Zora. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" "Nothing," she said. "I just couldn't keep watching it happen. It's wrong what they're doing." "Who's they?" Zora glanced nervously at the security guards. "I've said too much already. Please just check out that address, see for yourself." She backed away. "I have to go." Before Jackson could stop her, she turned and hurried down the corridor, disappearing around a corner. "Should I go after her, sir?" Thomas asked. Jackson stared at the space where Zora had been, the piece of paper heavy in his hand. "No, let's go." The ride back to his penthouse was a blur. Jackson sat in silence, the paper with the Connecticut address clutched in his fist. His mind raced with possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. Elena, alive? It was impossible. He'd spent millions on the search and recovery efforts. He'd consulted with maritime experts, hired the best private investigators. All evidence pointed to her death. "Would you like me to look into this woman, sir?" Thomas asked as they rode the private elevator to Jackson's penthouse. Jackson hesitated. "Not yet, I need to think." Alone in his vast living space overlooking Central Park, Jackson poured himself a drink and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights twinkled below, reminding him of the night he'd proposed to Elena on this very spot. She'd teased him for choosing such an obvious location. The view, the ring, the champagne. Could you be more predictable? But she'd said yes with tears in her eyes. Jackson pulled out the crumpled note and smoothed it flat on the glass table. Patient 17, East Wing. What kind of facility was it? A hospital, research center, or something more sinister? He moved to his home office and sat at his computer. Within minutes, he'd found the location, a private medical facility called the Westlake Institute for Advanced Therapy. Its website was minimal, describing it as a specialized treatment center for neurological disorders, with an emphasis on privacy and discretion. No staff were listed, just a contact form and the same address Zora had written down. Jackson opened his safe and pulled out a worn leather box. Inside was a small collection of items he couldn't bear to look at, but couldn't throw away. Elena's wedding ring, recovered from their bedroom after her disappearance, a lock of her dark hair, and a USB drive containing personal photos. He plugged in the drive and scrolled through the images until he found what he was looking for. Elena at the beach, her hair blowing in the wind, her left arm raised to wave at the camera. Jackson zoomed in on her wrist. The small crescent-shaped scar was clearly visible. How had Zora known about it? Jackson closed the photo and leaned back in his chair. Logic told him this was another cruel hoax. Elena was gone. He'd accepted that painful truth years ago. Opening this door would only lead to more heartache. Yet as the night deepened, he found himself returning to his computer, researching the Westlake Institute more thoroughly. He discovered it had been established only 2 years ago, funded by a private medical research group. The property was remote, surrounded by woods, with state-of-the-art security. By dawn, Jackson had made his decision. If there was even the slightest chance Elena was alive, he had to know. He would not involve his regular team or alert anyone at his company. This would be a personal investigation, conducted with the utmost discretion. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Miles, it's Jackson Mercer. I need your help with something sensitive. How soon can you be in New York? Miles Chen arrived at Jackson's penthouse the following afternoon. He looked exactly as Jackson remembered. Tall, lean, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. The former head of security for Mercer Technologies had left the company 2 years ago to start his own firm, but the bond of trust between the men remained intact. You look terrible, Miles said bluntly as Jackson let him in. Jackson ran a hand through his disheveled hair. He hadn't slept. Good to see you too. Miles followed him to the living room, where Jackson had assembled a makeshift investigation board, printouts of the Westlake Institute, maps of the surrounding area, and public records were spread across the glass table. So someone approached you claiming Elena is alive, Miles summarized after Jackson explained the previous night's events. And you believe her because… I don't know if I believe her, Jackson replied, pacing. But she knew about Elena's scar. That's not public knowledge. Miles picked up a photo of the Westlake Institute. This place looks like a fortress disguised as a health retreat. Getting in won't be easy. That's why I called you. Jackson stopped pacing. I need to know what's happening there. But I can't involve the company. This stays between us. Miles studied his former boss. Have you considered this might be an elaborate scam? You're worth billions, Jackson. People have tried crazier things for less money. Of course I've considered it, Jackson snapped. I've spent the night considering every possibility. But what if it's not a scam? What if Elena is somehow alive in that place? His voice cracked slightly. I have to know. Miles sighed. All right. Let's start with the girl, Zora Wilson. If she's genuine, great. If not, we need to know who's pulling her strings. By evening, they had hired Diana Reeves, a private investigator recommended by Miles. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, with a reputation for discretion and a network of contacts throughout the city. Finding Zora Wilson shouldn't be difficult, Diana said, reviewing the information they'd given her. If she really works at this Westlake place, I can verify that too. But I should warn you, places like that take patient confidentiality very seriously. Getting information about who's inside will be challenging. I don't need a full patient list, Jackson said. Just confirmation about one person. Diana nodded. I'll see what I can do. In the meantime, you might want to look into who owns this institute. Follow the money and you usually find the truth. For the next 2 days, Jackson maintained his normal routine on the surface, attending meetings, reviewing reports, making decisions that affected thousands of employees. But his mind was elsewhere. Miles set up a secure office in a spare room of the penthouse, and each evening, they gathered to share findings. Diana's initial report on Zora Wilson was promising. She's 26, lives in Brooklyn with 2 younger siblings she supports. Parents died in a car accident 4 years ago. She's studying nursing at Kunwai and works 3 jobs: catering, weekend shifts at a coffee shop, and yes, part-time at Westlake Institute as a patient care assistant. So she's legitimate, Jackson said, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. Seems to be. No criminal record, good student, well-liked by neighbors. Nothing suggests she's running a scam. Miles, meanwhile, had been digging into Westlake's ownership. It's deliberately obscured, he explained, pointing to a complex chart he'd created. The institute is officially owned by Horizon Health Partners, which is owned by a holding company in Delaware, which traces back to various shell companies. Classic way to hide who's really calling the shots. Jackson frowned. Can we break through it? Given enough time, yes. But there's a faster way to get information about what's happening inside those walls. Miles pulled out blueprints of the Westlake Institute. I think it's time for a site visit. The plan they developed was simple but risky. Jackson would pose as a potential donor interested in supporting the Institute's work. Miles would accompany him as his personal assistant, using the opportunity to gather intelligence on the facility's security systems. Diana would stay outside in a surveillance position, monitoring entrances and exits. 3 days later, they drove to Connecticut in an unmarked car, The Westlake Institute was even more impressive in person, a modern glass and stone structure, nestled among towering pines with manicured grounds and a discreet security presence. "Remember," Miles murmured as they approached the main entrance, "we're just here to look around. Don't push too hard for information." The receptionist greeted them warmly when Jackson introduced himself. "Mr. Mercer, we're honored by your interest in our work. Dr. Winters will be delighted to give you a tour." Dr. Alicia Winters appeared. Moments later, a polished woman in her 50s with a practiced smile. "Mr. Mercer, what a pleasant surprise. We rarely open our doors to visitors, but for someone of your stature, we're happy to make an exception." As they walked through the facility, Dr. Winters explained their approach to treating neurological disorders. "Our patients come to us when traditional methods have failed. Many suffer from memory disorders, cognitive decline, or traumatic brain injuries. We offer experimental treatments not available elsewhere." The tour was carefully controlled. They saw common areas, a state-of-the-art imaging room, and therapy spaces, but no patients. Every door required Dr. Winters' keycard to access. "Your security is impressive," Jackson commented casually. "Our patients value their privacy above all else," Dr. Winters replied. "Many are public figures or come from prominent families. Discretion is our hallmark." As they rounded a corner, Jackson noticed a sign reading East Wing with a restricted access notification. His heart rate quickened. "What's in that section?" he asked. "Our long-term care patients," Dr. Winters said smoothly. "Those requiring the most intensive treatments. I'm afraid that area is strictly off-limits to visitors." Just then, a door to the East Wing opened and an orderly emerged, pushing a wheelchair. Jackson caught only a glimpse of the patient, a woman with short dark hair, her face partially obscured by a surgical mask, her thin frame draped in a blue hospital gown. The orderly quickly guided the wheelchair through another door, but not before Jackson noticed the woman's left hand gripping the armrest. Though he couldn't see clearly, something about the posture, the set of the shoulders, sent a jolt through him. "Is everything all right, Mr. Mercer?" Dr. Winters asked, noticing his sudden tension. Jackson forced a smile. "Yes, just impressed by your facility. Tell me more about your funding needs." The remainder of the tour passed in a blur. Jackson made appropriate noises of interest and promised to consider a donation. By the time they left, his mind was racing. The woman in the wheelchair, could it possibly have been Elena? Or was his desperate hope making him see things that weren't there? "Well?" Miles asked once they were safely in the car. "I need to get into that East Wing," Jackson said firmly. "There was a woman—" "Slow down," Miles cautioned. "We need more information before we start breaking into restricted areas." "What did Diana find?" "Diana joined them at a diner 20 miles from the Institute. 6 staff members exited during your visit," she reported. "I photographed all of them." She handed Jackson her tablet. "Anyone look familiar?" Jackson swiped through the images, stopping at the 5th one. "This is the orderly I saw with the wheelchair." Diana nodded. "His name is Raymond Tucker. He leaves every day at 4 p.m. like clockwork." "We need to talk to him," Jackson decided. "Already arranged," Diana said with a slight smile. "His car has a conveniently flat tire in the parking lot of the Blue Anchor Bar about 5 miles from here. The tow truck won't arrive for at least 2 hours. I suggest we offer our assistance." Raymond Tucker was nursing a beer when they entered the bar. Diana approached him first, striking up a conversation about car troubles. By the time Jackson and Miles joined them, Raymond was relaxed and grateful for the promised help. "You work at Westlake, right?" Diana asked casually. "My cousin was thinking of applying for a job there." Raymond shrugged. "Pays decent, but the hours are rough. And the rules, man, they're strict as hell. No phones in patient areas, no discussing cases, no unauthorized access between wings." "Must be interesting work, though," Jackson prompted. "Sometimes. Mostly sad, you know. People with their brains all messed up." He took a swig of beer. "The ones in East Wing are the worst cases. Some been there since the place opened." "Like the woman I saw today?" Jackson asked, heart pounding. "In the wheelchair?" Raymond narrowed his eyes. "You were there today? Potential donor." Jackson explained smoothly. Just caught a glimpse. She seemed familiar somehow. Raymond laughed. No way, man. Those patients in East Wing, they're nobodies. Just rich nobodies whose families don't want to deal with them. Patient 17's been there almost 2 years. Doesn't even talk. Jackson felt his hope crumbling. Patient 17? Yeah, that's what we call her. No names in East Wing, just numbers. Security protocol. Raymond checked his phone. Tow truck coming anytime soon? Jackson barely heard Miles assuring Raymond help was on the way. Patient 17. The A. Same designation Zora had written on the note. It couldn't be coincidence. As they left the bar, Jackson made his decision. I need to speak with Zora again. If patient 17 is Elena, she's the only one who can confirm it. Miles and Diana exchanged worried glances. And if it is Elena, Miles asked quietly, what then? These people have gone to extraordinary lengths to keep her hidden. They won't just let her walk out. Jackson's expression hardened. Then we'll have to be more extraordinary. Finding Zora proved harder than expected. 3 days after their visit to Westlake, Diana reported troubling news. She's gone, Diana said, spreading photos across Jackson's dining table. Stopped showing up at all 3 jobs. Her apartment manager says she packed some bags and left. In a hurry. Jackson studied the surveillance images Diana had collected. One showed Zora leaving her apartment building with a duffel bag, constantly looking over her shoulder. She looked scared, Miles observed. With good reason, Diana replied. Someone broke into her apartment the night after you met her. The building's security cameras caught this. She pulled up a video on her tablet. The footage showed 2 men, in dark clothing, picking the lock on Zora's door at 2 a.m., entering the apartment and leaving 15 minutes later. Their faces were carefully angled away from the cameras. Professionals, Miles said grimly. Jackson felt a chill. If they went after Zora, they might know about us too. As if on cue, Miles' phone beeped with a security alert. He checked it, his expression darkening. Security breach at your office. Someone's trying to access your private server. They relocated immediately to a hotel suite Miles had prepared as a backup. While Miles worked to secure their digital footprint, Diana continued, searching for Zora. Jackson, meanwhile, dug deeper into Westlake's financial structure. A pattern began to emerge, a web of connections he hadn't seen before. Horizon Health Partners, Westlake's parent company, had received significant investment from Reed Venture Capital. The name struck a chord. Owen Reed, Jackson muttered, pulling up more information. Vincent's old college roommate. Vincent Shaw had been Jackson's business partner since founding Mercer Technologies 15 years ago. They'd built the company together, turning a small tech startup into a global powerhouse. Vincent had been devastated by Elena's death, supporting Jackson through the darkest days of grief. Could be a coincidence, Jackson told himself, but his instincts said otherwise. He called Alex Wong, the head of his company's cybersecurity team and one of the few people he trusted implicitly. Alex, I need you to run a deep background check on Vincent. Personal finances, communications, travel, everything from the past 3 years. Keep it completely confidential. May I ask why? Alex sounded concerned. Just a hunch about some investment. Patterns. Probably nothing. That night, Jackson barely slept. The pieces were aligning in a pattern he didn't want to see. If Vincent was connected to Westlake, if he knew about Elena. His phone rang at 5 a.m. It was Diana. I found her, she said without preamble. Zora's staying with her grandmother in Queens and she's asking for you. They met in a small apartment in a modest brick building. Zora's grandmother, Mrs. Wilson, welcomed them with cautious hospitality, offering tea before retreating to another room to give them privacy. Zora looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. They fired me, she said, from all my jobs. Same day. Then someone broke into my place. We know, Jackson said. I'm sorry. I didn't think they'd come after you. Who's they? Miles asked. Zora wrapped her hands around her teacup. I don't know exactly. The people who run Westlake. They made it clear when I started working there. What happens inside stays inside, but she hesitated. I couldn't just ignore what I was seeing. Tell us about patient 17, Jackson urged gently. Zora took a deep breath. I started working nights in the East Wing about 6 months ago. The patients there are different from the rest. No visitors, minimal staff contact, heavy medication. Patient 17 caught my attention because she seemed aware, like she was fighting through the fog. Did she speak to you? Diana asked. Not really talking. More like struggling to communicate, writing things down sometimes when she could. The staff is supposed to report and destroy any patient writings, but Zora reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I kept this one. Jackson unfolded the paper with trembling hands. On it was a crude drawing of what looked like a molecule with a chemical formula scrawled beside it. At the bottom in shaky handwriting, "Tell JM, danger." His throat tightened. JM, Jackson Mercer. I didn't understand it, Zora continued. But then I saw her looking at a magazine one day. Your face was on the cover. She became agitated, trying to point at it. That's when I started paying attention. How did you know she was Elena Mercer? Miles asked, still skeptical. I didn't, not at first. But she kept drawing your initials. So I looked you up online, saw articles about your missing wife. There was a photo of her receiving some science award. Same woman, I was sure of it. Different hair, thinner face, but her eyes. You don't forget those eyes. Jackson nodded, a lump in his throat. Elena's eyes were extraordinary, deep brown with flecks of amber. What else can you tell us about her condition? She's physically weak. Wheelchair most of the time, though I've seen her stand briefly. They keep her medicated, something in her IV every few hours that makes her drift away. When it wears off, she's more present, but that's when they give her more. Any idea what they want from her? Diana asked. The doctors are always reviewing. Her brain scans, making notes. Sometimes they show her images or play recordings, then monitor her reactions. Once I heard Dr. Winters tell someone on the phone that the memory pathway reconstruction is progressing but still unstable. Jackson exchanged glances with Miles. Elena's research at Mercer Technologies had focused on neural pathway mapping for memory restoration, a potential treatment for Alzheimer's and traumatic brain injuries. There's something else, Zora said hesitantly. About a week before I contacted you, they brought in new equipment. Patient 17 became extremely agitated when she saw it. She managed to grab my hand and write on my palm. Tell him they're using it wrong. People will die. A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Miles spoke. We need more information about what's happening in that East Wing. I might be able to help with that. Alex Wong's voice came through Jackson's phone, which he'd left on speaker on the coffee table. Sorry to interrupt, but you need to hear this right away. Go ahead, Alex, Jackson said, straightening up. I've been looking into Vincent Shaw as you asked. For the past 3 years, he's been transferring substantial funds to offshore accounts linked to Helix Innovations. What's Helix? Diana asked. A biotech startup, Jackson replied, his mind racing. They're developing neural interface technology, similar to what Elena was working on. There's more, Alex continued. Vincent has visited the Westlake Institute 6 times in the past year. And I found something in his private email account, a progress report on something called Project Lazarus, sent from Dr. Winters at Westlake. Jackson felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. Vincent, his closest friend, his trusted partner, had betrayed him in the most unimaginable way. I need to see that report, he said, his voice cold. Already sent to your secure email. And Jackson? Vincent is scheduled to visit Westlake tomorrow afternoon. After the call ended, Jackson sat in silence reading the report Alex had forwarded. The clinical language did little to mask the horror of what it described. Experimental procedures using Elena's research to manipulate and reconstruct memory pathways in the brain. They're not treating her, Jackson said finally, looking up, with rage in his eyes. They're experimenting on her, using her own research against her. But why? Zora asked. What could they possibly gain? Control, Miles suggested. If they can manipulate memories, they can essentially reshape a person's reality. It's about the patents, Jackson realized, the pieces finally clicking into place. Elena was close to a breakthrough before the accident. The intellectual property rights alone would be worth billions. But she had concerns about the safety protocols, wanted more testing before moving forward. And Vincent got impatient, Diana concluded. Not just impatient, Jackson's voice hardened. The timing of her disappearance, the boat accident, it wasn't an accident at all. The implications hung heavy in the air. If Vincent had arranged Elena's supposed death, if he'd been keeping her captive for 3 years, using her research while experimenting on her mind. We need to get her out, Jackson said, his decision made. Now. Miles shook his head. We can't just storm the place. They have security, cameras, restricted access. We need a plan. Actually, Zora said, I might have a way in. She pulled out her Westlake ID card. They fired me, but they never asked for this back. And tomorrow is Tuesday, delivery day. The service entrance will be busy with trucks coming and going. It's too dangerous for you to go back, Jackson protested. They don't know I've found you, Zora pointed out. As far as they're concerned, I'm just a scared ex-employee who knows better than to talk. And I know the East Wing schedule. When the shift changes happen, which doors have keycard access, where the cameras are. Diana nodded approvingly. With inside information, we might have a chance. There's another angle we can use, Jackson said thoughtfully. Vincent is visiting tomorrow. If he's there, his attention will be on that meeting, not on security. They spent the next hours planning, reviewing Westlake's layout based on what Zora remembered and what Miles had observed during their visit. By dawn, they had outlined a risky but feasible extraction plan. If we succeed, Miles cautioned, we'll be revealing ourselves to some very powerful, dangerous people. They won't just let this go. They've had my wife for 3 years, Jackson replied, his expression grim. They've stolen her research, experimented on her mind, and made me believe she was dead. I don't care what happens after we get her out. I just want Elena back. What none of them noticed was the black sedan parked half a block away, or the man inside taking photographs of Mrs. Wilson's apartment building with a telephoto lens. As they finalized their rescue plan, he picked up his phone and dialed. Sir, he said when the call connected, we've confirmed it. Mercer is with the Wilson girl right now. They're planning something. On the other end of the line, Vincent Shaw gazed out his office window at the Manhattan skyline. Thank you for the update. Change of plans. I'll be visiting Westlake tonight. Instead, make sure everything is ready. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Westlake Institute grounds as Jackson, Miles, and Diana took their positions. They had arrived in separate vehicles, parking at different locations to avoid suspicion. Dressed in delivery company uniforms provided by Diana's connections, they blended with the steady stream of workers entering the facility. Security at the service entrance is lighter than the main gate, Zora had told them during their planning. Tuesday deliveries mean lots of unfamiliar faces coming and going. It's your best chance to get in unnoticed. Jackson adjusted his cap lower over his eyes and shouldered a dolly stacked with boxes. The guard at the service entrance barely glanced at the delivery slip Diana had forged, waving them through with bored efficiency. Step 1 complete, Miles murmured into the small communication device hidden in his collar. We're in the loading. Duck. Zora's voice came through their earpieces. She was stationed in a van 2 blocks away, coordinating their movements using a rough map of the facility she had drawn from memory. The staff locker room should be straight ahead, past the kitchen. There's a service elevator at the end of that hallway that goes to all floors, including the East Wing. They navigated the bustling back areas of the Institute, nodding professionally to passing staff. The kitchen was especially busy, preparing dinner for patients. The chaos provided perfect cover as they slipped one by one into the locker room. According to the schedule, there's a shift change at 6:30, Zora continued. You'll have about 15 minutes when the East Wing will be minimally staffed. Jackson checked his watch. 6:10 p.m. We need to move faster. Diana emerged from the back of the locker room holding 3 lab coats and ID badges. Found these in unlocked lockers. They'll get us through the basic checkpoints. Dressed in lab coats with stolen IDs clipped to their pockets, they made their way to the service elevator. Jackson's heart pounded as the doors closed behind them. There was no turning back now. "The East Wing is on the 3rd floor," Zora instructed. "Patient 17's room is number 317, at the far end of the hallway." As the elevator ascended, Miles pulled out a small electronic device. "This will disrupt the security cameras for about 90 seconds when activated. Should give us just enough time to get past the main nursing station." The elevator doors opened to a quiet, sterile hallway. Unlike the warm, inviting areas they had seen during their tour, the East Wing had an institutional coldness: stark white walls, bright fluorescent lighting, and an antiseptic smell. A sign on the wall read, "Authorized personnel only. Nursing." "Station is around the corner," Diana whispered. "Miles, ready?" Miles nodded, his finger hovering over the device. "On 3. 1, 2. The sound of approaching voices made them freeze. Jackson pulled his colleagues into a nearby supply closet, just as 2 doctors walked past, deep in conversation. "Increase the dosage again, but she's still fighting it," one was saying. "Winters wants to try the new protocol tonight." "Is Shaw here yet?" He wanted to be present for this phase. Already in the observation room, seems anxious to get results. Jackson's blood ran cold. Vincent was already here. Their timing couldn't have been worse. "Change of plans," he whispered once the doctors had passed. "Vincent's here in an observation room. Zora, do you know where that is?" "End of the hall, across from the nurses' station," Zora replied. "It's where they monitor patients during procedures." Jackson made a quick decision. "Diana, find room 317. Miles, create a distraction at the opposite end of the hall. I'll deal with Vincent." "That wasn't the plan," Miles protested. "We're supposed to stay together." "Plans change," Jackson said grimly. "We may not get another chance. Go." Miles activated the camera disruptor and they moved swiftly into the hall. Diana headed right toward the patient rooms. Miles went left, pulling a small smoke device from his pocket. Jackson strode purposefully toward the observation room, his borrowed lab coat and confident demeanor his only disguise. The observation room door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, Jackson could see Vincent standing with Dr. Winters, both looking at something through a large window. Jackson's angle didn't allow him to see what, or who, they were observing. "The memory extraction protocol is ready, Dr. Winters was saying. "With the increased neural stimulation, we should be able to access the complete formula this time." "We've had too many delays already," Vincent replied, his voice tight with impatience. "The board is getting anxious. Helix has promised a working prototype by the end of the quarter." "Science can't be rushed, Mr. Shaw. The damage from the last attempt took weeks to repair. If we push too hard, we could lose everything. That's a risk I'm willing to take." Vincent's voice turned cold. "Proceed with the extraction." A sudden commotion erupted from the far end of the hallway. Miles's distraction. Alarms began to sound, and a voice over the intercom called for assistance with a patient in distress. "What? Now?" Dr. Winters sighed in frustration. "Wait here, Mr. Shaw, I'll see what's happening." As Dr. Winters hurried out, she brushed past Jackson without a second glance. Jackson waited until she was gone, then pushed the door open. Vincent was still standing at the window, his back to the door. Through the glass, Jackson could finally see what held his attention. A hospital room where a thin woman was strapped to a specialized chair, electrodes attached to her head. Medical equipment surrounded her, monitoring vital signs and brain activity. Her hair was cut short, her face gaunt, but Jackson would have recognized her anywhere. "Elena." "Hello, Vincent," Jackson said quietly. Vincent whirled around, his shock quickly masked by a controlled smile. "Jackson, this is unexpected." "Is it?" Jackson stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Or did you know I'd find out eventually?" Vincent's eyes darted to the door, calculating his options. "Whatever you think is happening here, you're mistaken. This is a private medical facility." "Stop lying," Jackson cut him off. "I know what you've done. The question is why? Why fake her death? Why keep her prisoner all these years?" A flash of anger crossed Vincent's face. Prisoner? We saved her life. She was going to destroy everything we'd built. By insisting on proper safety protocols, by refusing to rush her research to market. Vincent's composure cracked. Her research? We funded it. We provided the lab, the team, the resources. And then, when we were on the verge of changing the world, she wanted to pull back because of some theoretical risk. Through the window, Jackson could see Elena struggling weakly against her restraints, as if sensing his presence. A technician was preparing an IV bag. She found a flaw in the neural interface, Jackson guessed. Something dangerous. Vincent scoffed. A minor issue that could have been fixed after launch. But she threatened to go public, to destroy years of work because of her precious ethics. His voice turned bitter. Do you have any idea what her memory technology is worth? Billions. Military applications alone would... So you arranged her. Accident, Jackson said, his voice dangerously quiet. You made me believe she was dead while you kept her here, using her knowledge, experimenting on her mind. It wasn't supposed to be for this long, Vincent admitted, dropping all pretense. We just needed access to her research, the parts she kept only in her head. Once we extracted that, she would have been... released. Released? Jackson laughed humorlessly. You mean killed. For real this time. Vincent's silence was confirmation. Enough. You were my friend, Jackson said, the weight of the betrayal crushing him. I trusted you with everything. We mourned her together. Business isn't personal, Jackson. It never was. Vincent reached slowly toward his pocket. And now you've put me in an impossible position. Before Vincent could pull out whatever he was reaching for, the door burst open. Diana stood there, breathing hard. We've got trouble. Security knows we're here. Vincent used the distraction to grab a phone from the desk, but Jackson was faster. He lunged forward, knocking the phone from Vincent's hand and pinning him against the wall. Where's Elena's room? He demanded of Diana, not taking his eyes off Vincent. Right through there. Diana pointed to a door connecting the observation room to the patient room they could see through the window. But there's a guard. A crash from the patient room interrupted her. The technician who had been preparing the IV was now sprawled on the floor, and Miles stood over him, a fire extinguisher in hand. Found another way in, Miles called through the glass. We need to hurry. Jackson tightened his grip on Vincent's collar. You're going to help us walk out of here. If you alert anyone, if you try anything at all, I will make sure every detail of what you've done becomes front-page news. Vincent's eyes narrowed. You think it's that simple? This goes beyond me, beyond Westlake. Powerful people are invested in this technology. They won't just let you take her. Watch me, Jackson growled, shoving Vincent toward the connecting door. In the patient room, Miles was already disconnecting the electrodes from Elena's head while Diana stood guard at the other entrance. Up close, the changes in Elena were heartbreaking. Her once vibrant face hollow, her body frail from years of confinement. But when her eyes found Jackson's, they widened with recognition. Jack? Her voice was a raspy whisper, as if rarely used. Jackson was at her side instantly, taking her hand. I'm here, I'm getting you out. How did you find me? Each word seemed to require immense effort. Someone brave helped us, Jackson said, thinking of Zora waiting anxiously in the... Foster, can you stand? Miles had finished removing the medical equipment. We need to move. That alarm is still going. But security will figure out it's a diversion soon. With Jackson supporting most of her weight, Elena managed to stand on shaky legs. Vincent watched with a mixture of anger and resignation as Miles zip-tied his hands. Behind his back. This won't end here, Vincent warned. You have no idea what you're interfering with. Diana, who had been checking the hallway, turned back with an urgent expression. Security team heading this way, at least 4 guards. Is there another exit? Jackson asked. Service stairs at the end of the hall, Elena whispered, surprising them. I memorized the layout after they reduced the medication. Even in her weakened state, her mind remained sharp. Jackson felt a surge of pride mixed with rage at what she had endured. "Miles, bring Vincent," Jackson ordered. "Diana, lead the way." With Elena leaning heavily against him, Jackson followed Diana into the hallway. They moved as quickly as Elena's condition allowed, Vincent stumbling ahead of them under Miles's firm grip. The service stairwell was just as Elena had described, tucked away in an alcove at the end of the corridor. As they pushed through the door, the facility alarm system suddenly changed tone, becoming more urgent. A voice over the intercom announced, "A security lockdown." "They know," Vincent said with grim satisfaction. "All exits will be sealed. You're trapped." Diana peered down the stairwell. "He's right. I can see guards at the bottom level." "Up," Elena whispered. "Roof access. Helicopter pad." Jackson looked at her in surprise. "How do you know that?" A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "I listen. When they think I'm not there." She tapped her head weakly. "Still me. In here. Parts of me." "Up it is," Miles decided, pushing Vincent ahead. "Let's hope Zora can adjust the extraction plan." As they climbed, Elena's strength began to falter. Jackson lifted her into his arms, determined not to leave her behind after coming this far. Each step up the concrete stairs felt like a victory and a risk. Behind them, they could hear voices echoing in the stairwell. Security was following. "Zora," Diana spoke into her communication device. "Change of plans. We're heading to the roof. Is there any way you can get to us there?" "Through." Their earpieces. Zora's voice was tight with worry. "The roof? That wasn't in the plan. Let me think. There's a service road that circles around the back of the facility. It leads up a hill that might overlook the roof. How far up are you?" "Almost there," Miles answered as they rounded another flight of stairs. Above them, a door marked "Roof." Access was visible. The evening air hit them like a blessing as they burst onto the roof. The helicopter pad was empty, its white circle stark against the dark surface. The sun had set, and the facility grounds spread out below them, security lights blinking on in the growing darkness. "Now what?" Diana asked, securing the roof access door with a fire extinguisher through the handle. "It wouldn't hold for long." Jackson gently set Elena down, keeping an arm around her waist for support. She was trembling with exhaustion, but her eyes remained alert, taking in their surroundings. "There." She pointed weakly to the western edge of the roof. "That hill. Trees provide cover." Beyond the perimeter fence, a wooded hill rose above the facility. If they could somehow cross the gap. Vincent laughed bitterly. "You're going to jump? It's at least 30 feet to those trees and another 20 down if you miss. You'll kill her and yourselves." The door behind them shuddered as someone tried to force it open. Their time was running out. "Zora," Jackson called urgently into his communication device. "Can you get to the top of that hill on the west side? We need an extraction point now." "Already on my way," Zora replied. "There's a maintenance road. I can see the roof from here." Miles was examining the edge of the roof. "The gap is too wide to jump, but—" He pointed to a utility pole near the building's edge. From it, thick cables stretched toward the tree line. "Those power lines might support our weight, one at a time." Vincent shook his head. "You're insane. She can barely stand, let alone cross on a cable." "Watch me," Elena said with unexpected strength in her voice. She straightened as much as her weakened body allowed, her eyes meeting Jackson's. "Together?" Jackson nodded, a plan forming. "Together." The pounding on the roof access door grew more intense. The fire extinguisher wedged through the handle was bending under the pressure. They had minutes, maybe seconds. "Miles, you go first with the cable," Jackson ordered. "Test if it'll hold." Miles nodded, removing his belt and looping it over the thick power line that stretched from the utility pole toward the tree line. The cable dipped under his weight as he pushed off from the roof's edge, but it held. Hand over hand, he pulled, himself across the gap, legs dangling over the 30-foot drop. "It works," he called back once he reached the trees. "Send Diana next." Diana was already preparing her belt as a makeshift pulley. "What about him?" She nodded toward Vincent, who stood watching them with cold calculation in his eyes. Bring him, Jackson decided. We can't leave him to raise the alarm. You're making a mistake, Vincent said as Diana secured his bound hands to her belt. This facility has cameras everywhere. They're tracking your every move. Then we better move. Fast, Diana replied, pushing off from the edge. The cable sagged more under their combined weight, but still held as they slid toward the trees. Jackson turned to Elena, who was leaning against the utility pole for support. Her breathing was labored, but determination shone in her eyes. Can you make it? He asked softly. 3 years, she whispered. Waited 3 years. Not staying now. Jackson removed his belt and looped it over the cable. Hold on to me. Don't look down. Elena wrapped her thin arms around his neck, pressing her face against his chest. Jackson could feel her heart racing, matching his own. With one arm securing, Elena and the other gripping the belt, he pushed off from the roof. The cable groaned under their weight, dipping alarmingly. Below them, security personnel burst onto the roof, shouting and pointing. Jackson didn't look back, focusing only on moving forward hand over hand as Elena clung to him. Almost there, he encouraged her. Just a little further. The sound of a helicopter approaching filled the air. Searchlights swept the facility grounds, and a voice through a loudspeaker ordered them to stop. They're bringing in air support. Diana called from the tree line where she and Miles were securing Vincent to a trunk. We need to move. With a final effort, Jackson reached the trees, Miles helping to pull them onto solid ground, just as the helicopter's spotlight found the power line they'd used to escape. This way, Miles directed, pointing deeper into the woods. Zora should be waiting on the service road. Supporting Elena between them, they hurried through the trees, branches whipping past their faces. The helicopter circled overhead, its spotlight sweeping through the canopy. Behind them, voices shouted as security personnel began to pursue on foot. Elena stumbled, her strength fading. Can't much further, she gasped. Jackson lifted her into his arms again. We're almost there. Don't give up now. They broke through, the tree line onto a narrow gravel road. Headlights flashed twice, Zora's signal. The van was parked 50 yards away, engine running. Hurry. Zora called, jumping out to open the side door. Miles dragged Vincent toward the van while Diana ran ahead to help Zora. Jackson followed with Elena, acutely aware of the helicopter's searchlight drawing closer and the sounds of pursuit growing. Louder, a shot rang out, kicking up gravel near Jackson's feet. He hunched protectively over Elena, increasing his pace despite his burning muscles. Get down, Miles shouted, pulling a small canister from his pocket. He lobbed it behind them, and smoke immediately billowed out, creating a screen between them and their pursuers. They reached the van, Jackson carefully placing Elena inside before climbing in after her. Zora slammed the door shut as Miles shoved Vincent into the back and Diana jumped into the passenger seat. Go, Diana urged. Zora floored the accelerator, the van lurching forward down the rough service road. The helicopter's spotlight briefly caught them before the trees provided cover again. Roadblocks will be up within minutes, Miles warned, securing Vincent, who was struggling against his restraints. We need to switch vehicles. Already planned for that, Zora replied, taking a sharp turn onto a smaller track. My friend's truck is parked half a mile ahead by the old ranger station. Elena lay on the floor of the van, her breathing shallow. Jackson cradled her head in his lap, brushing sweat-soaked hair from her forehead. Stay with me, he pleaded, softly. We're almost safe. Her eyes fluttered open, more lucid than before. The research, she whispered urgently. Have to destroy it. Dangerous. What research? Your memory technology? She nodded weakly. Not ready. Side effects. Catastrophic. They altered it. Made it worse. Vincent laughed bitterly from his corner. You still don't understand what you've created, do you? Your technology doesn't just restore memories, it can implant them, replace them, reshape a person's entire reality. Do you have any idea what governments would pay for that power? That's why you kept her alive, Jackson realized. You needed her to solve the problems with the technology. We needed her brain, Vincent corrected coldly. The patterns, the neural pathways that made the discovery possible. Some things can't be replicated or written down. Elena gripped Jackson's hand with surprising strength. The formula, in my head, must destroy all of it. Too dangerous. The van skidded to a stop beside an old pickup truck parked near an abandoned building. Zora jumped out, already moving to transfer their essential gear. This is where we split up, Miles decided. Diana, you and I will take Vincent in the van, create a diversion. Jackson, you go with Elena and Zora in the truck, head for the safe house we discussed. Jackson nodded, carefully helping Elena out of the van. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance, coming closer. What about the research? Jackson asked. If what Elena says is true, we can't let them keep using it. I have an idea about that, Diana said, pulling out her phone. But first, we need to get you three out of here. With Zora's help, Jackson settled Elena in the truck's back seat, wrapping her in a blanket. She was fading in and out of consciousness, the ordeal taking its toll on her already weakened body. Stay with her, Zora told Jackson, climbing into the driver's seat. I know these back roads. We'll lose anyone following us. As Miles and Diana prepared to leave in the van with Vincent, Jackson called out, Be careful and thank you, both of you. Miles nodded solemnly. Just get Elena somewhere safe. We'll handle the rest. The vehicles headed in opposite directions, the van back toward the main road, the truck deeper into the rural countryside. In the back seat, Jackson held Elena close, feeling her pulse, weak but steady. Jack, she murmured, her eyes closed. Is this real? Not another simulation? It's real, he assured her, throat tight with emotion. You're free. I found you. The girl, she helped. Brave. Yes, Zora was very brave, Jackson agreed, meeting Zora's eyes in the rearview mirror. We all owe her everything. Zora shook, her head. I just did what was right. Anyone would have. No, Elena whispered. Not anyone. Few. Very few. They drove through the night, taking winding back roads, changing direction frequently to throw off any pursuit. By dawn, they reached a small cabin by a lake, miles from any town, the safe house Miles had arranged. We should be okay here for a few days, Zora said as she helped Jackson carry Elena inside. No one knows about this place. The cabin was simple but comfortable, with basic medical supplies Miles had thought to provide. Jackson settled Elena on the bed, checking her vital signs as Zora had shown him. She needs proper medical care, Zora observed worriedly. Those drugs they were giving her, we don't know what long-term effects they might have. I know someone who can help, Jackson said. A doctor who worked with Elena years ago, someone we can trust. But first, let's let her rest. As the morning progressed, Elena slept more peacefully than she had in years. Jackson sat beside her, unwilling to leave her side even for a moment. Zora busied herself preparing food and organizing the supplies. Jackson's phone vibrated, a secure message from Diana. Package delivered, evidence secured, authorities involved. Turn on the news. Zora found an old television in the cabin's living room and tuned it to a news channel. The breaking story left them speechless. Breaking news. Major raid at private medical facility in Connecticut. Reports indicate illegal human experimentation and corporate espionage. Technology billionaire Vincent Shaw among those arrested. Sources close to the investigation mention possible involvement of Helix Innovations in unethical medical procedures. How did they move so fast? Zora wondered. Diana has contacts in federal law enforcement, Jackson explained. And we gathered enough evidence during our rescue to justify an immediate raid. What about the research? Elena was so worried about it falling into the wrong hands. Before Jackson could answer, his phone vibrated again. Another message from Diana. All files destroyed. Miles made sure of it. Server room had an unfortunate accident. He showed the message to Zora, who smiled with relief. So it's over? This part is, Jackson replied. But Elena's recovery is just beginning. As if on cue, a soft voice called from the bedroom. Jack? They hurried back to find Elena sitting up slightly, more alert than before. The hours of uninterrupted sleep had already brought some color back to her face. "The news," she said. "I heard Vincent? Arrested," Jackson confirmed, sitting beside her. "And your research has been destroyed. It can't hurt anyone now." Elena closed her eyes briefly, relief washing over her features. 3 years, she whispered. They kept me between worlds. Sometimes I knew who I was, sometimes I was someone else. They were trying to control memory itself. "You don't have to talk about it now," Jackson said gently. "You're safe. That's all that matters." She reached for his hand. "No, I need to. While I'm clear. The drugs, they'll take time to leave my system. My mind comes and goes." Zora stepped forward. "I've been studying the medications they were giving you. With proper treatment, the effects should eventually reverse. Your mind will be your own again." Elena studied Zora with newfound clarity. "You're the one who found me." "Who told?" "Jack." Zora nodded, suddenly shy. "I couldn't just watch what they were doing to you." "Thank you," Elena said simply, tears filling her eyes. "For seeing me," when everyone else looked away. The three of them sat together as the morning sun streamed through the cabin windows. Outside, birds sang and the lake waters lapped gently. At the shore, ordinary sounds that Elena had been denied for 3 long years. "What happens now?" Zora asked eventually. Jackson looked at Elena, then at the young woman who had risked everything to help them. "Now we heal. Together. And then, we make sure this never happens to anyone else." Elena squeezed his hand weakly but with determination. "Yes," she agreed, her voice growing stronger. "Together." As the news continued to break the story of Westlake's illegal operations as authorities unraveled the full extent of Vincent's betrayal, 3 people in a remote cabin began the slow journey toward recovery and justice. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in 3 years it was illuminated by hope. And it had all begun with 8 simple words from a brave young woman. "Your wife is still alive," the black girl said,